Okay, principle 7, the board of directors. I've gone and found other principles that actually affect the board of directors and included them in a table, okay, under topic 7. So I'll tell you where I've gone, and there's a different principle that needs to be applied, but it's just going to be easier for your study purposes to have everything that's related to the board in one. So, composition remains exactly the same as King 3. Majority of your board need to be non-executive, and then the majority of those non-executive need to be independent. Guys, think about it. An executive director cannot be independent because he works and gets paid for that company, by that company. Whereas a non-executive has a job elsewhere and comes and sits on board meetings here to help govern and run this business a little better, but isn't solely dependent on any money that he's getting from this non-executive role. So when you get the board composition in a question, you need to go first and break it up. Take the whole composition, so the number of directors, and first split it into executive and then into non-exec. Okay? And what should happen here is majority should be non-exec. So you should have more non-exec, less executive. Then you've got another tier where you take your non-executives and you then need to split them into independent and non-independent. So non-independent, there would be some sort of conflict of interest stopping them from being independent. Independent, there's no conflict of interest, so they are independent. Okay, and we'll look at the independent requirements now. And again, when you look at this next tier, the majority of these should be independent and less of those should be non-independent. Okay, so take numbers to the board. Let's say we have a board of directors of 10. Majority should be non-executive, so let's say that 6 are non-executive, 4 are executive. They meet the requirement there. Majority of those non-executive should be independent, so let's say 4 are independent and 2 are non-independent. Look at that. Are the majority of the board members independent, non-executive? Independent, non-executive are 4. Is that the majority of the board members? No. 4 out of 10 is not a majority. But the first tier, non-execs were majority, which is the first requirement, and then of those non-execs, independent were the majority, so that's the second requirement. Always do that breakup first to make sure you are assessing the composition correctly. They need to have at least 2 executive directors. One is the CEO. Who is the other? It could be any other executive. So they need to have 2 executives. One must be the chief executive officer, and any other executive will meet the next criteria to have at least 2. The balance of your board. What do we mean by balance? Who needs to be in this board? Well, King 4 has gone a little bit rogue on balance. They're saying they want to make sure there's balance in diversity, in gender, in age, in knowledge. So they've gone and said, nah, I want a lot to be considered when we're looking at who is part of the board. I don't just want you to go and have only men above the age of 60. I want you to have some women. I want you to have some different cultures, some different races. I want you to have different ages, different knowledge. But each of them, remember we've already said, have to have sufficient knowledge of the industry and the business. Okay, we put that in principles 1 to 3. There we said they have to have sufficient knowledge. The organization, its industry, its laws. So we've got to make sure that these members who are diverse have that knowledge. The chairman should be independent, non-executive director. In King 4, there must be a lead appointed irrespective of the chairman's designation, and this lead chairman will be independent, non-executive. So why do they have a lead? In case the chairman is absent from a meeting, this person will be designated to then chair the meeting. In case the chairman is actually not independent on a decision, then this lead will chair the meeting and host the meeting. And when it comes to the chairman's performance evaluation, the lead will chair the chairman's evaluation. Okay, so that's why they have to have an independent, non-executive lead director who is appointed up front, because there's going to be a requirement that he will need to perform even if the chairman is independent, non-executive all the time. Okay, the appointment of directors, you've got a nomination committee. Nomination committee will have to nominate directors, nominate for appointment. Then what happens is their nomination will go to the board, and the board will approve the nomination, but not appointment. So the nomination committee will say, here are the directors we have put forward for nomination to become directors. The board will work through that list, and they will approve the guys that they think should be nominated for appointment. But the appointment will be then done at the AGM, annual general meeting, and who votes at the annual general meeting of a company? The shareholders. So, appointments of nominated directors will be done by the shareholders. Same as Companies Act, that requires the shareholders vote for appointments of directors. So the directors don't get to appoint, guys. They get to approve the nomination. Shareholders appoint directors. Okay, remuneration. This is covered in Principle 14. Okay, so note you won't find that in Principle 7. Governing body must approve the policy for remuneration. Who develops the remuneration policy? The Remuneration Committee. So just the same with the nomination of directors. Nomination Committee does the nominating. Remuneration will put together the policy that they feel should be used to remunerate directors and employees. Then the governing body, the board, will approve the policy. Next, I've got approval of the policy annually at the AGM. And guys, that statement needs to be adjusted slightly because it's not full approval. Above, the governing body approved the policy. But what happens here, annually at the AGM, the shareholders are able to pass a non-binding advisory vote. So they are able to give their opinion on the policy. And that opinion should be considered seriously. However, it doesn't have to change the actual policy. They do, however, get to approve the non-executive fees by special resolution, so that aligns with the Companies Act. And that's not an advisory vote, that is a proper requirement for the non-executive fees to be approved. Okay, policy has or must detail all types of remuneration, so we're looking at salaries, we're looking at fees for attendance of meetings, which would be for your non-execs. It's got to have any commissions, any share-based payments, any payments on termination. So anything that is going to be paid out to your directors must be included in this policy. And then I've just bolded disclosure in the remuneration report. Guys, it's huge. Like I say, you've got the remuneration report, which is going to be now divided into 3 requirements, and you're going to have a background, which is how they voted for this remuneration policy. It then needs to have an overview of the policy, which needs to give the basis, the fees, how they believe that it's fair, the performance measures, and then they have to have the implementation. Okay, and that's how each director is going to be remunerated according to these different types here. So it needs to split it out specifically for each director. Okay, I'll show you the report so you'll see it. I don't want you to go and study this, but I want you to see that it's intense disclosure, which has changed from last King, which just noted that they need to disclose just these points. Okay, there also must be additional disclosure in this remuneration report where 25% or more of the shareholders votes against the remuneration policy in their advisory vote on the policy. And why is it 25%? Because a special resolution by shareholders is 75% or more of the voting rights present at the meeting. So if 25% or more are voting against this policy, it's showing that they don't have the support of 75% or more, and so maybe this policy isn't very fair. Okay, also there must be a succession plan for all members, but they specifically address a succession plan for your CEO and chairman. So this is where they've got something in place in case the chairman or CEO resign or need to be removed. Okay, so let's attempt a class example. I'm going to give you guys 10 minutes to do this question, and then we can discuss after.